Hello and welcome to this episode of Content Marketing Commute here in beautiful Ajaccio. On the island of Corsica, where I am with my family on holiday, but I run a podcast, so better never stops and I never really get a holiday. You should all start a podcast, it's fantastic. No, I genuinely do it because I enjoy it. So welcome to Ajaccio, everyone. Beautiful place. We're here for a couple of weeks with my wife and my two children, and I thought I'd get out here and record an episode for the Content Marketing Commute podcast. I'm not commuting anywhere specifically, I'm just going on a walk along the sort of port area and maybe even down to the beach, and I'm going to be doing an About Last Week episode. And if you haven't been listening to the podcast for too long, essentially About Last Week episodes are ones where I focus in on something that we spoke about with an expert guest last week. Last week we're in Avignon to speak with Tom Winters of SEO Wind. He is an SEO expert. He knows so much about SEO, a leading authority in Europe on SEO, and we talked about so many interesting points. I'm just going to cross the road. Oh my gosh. We talked about so many interesting points around SEO, from zero-click search to the big leak that Rand Fishkin published, what it means. So I do encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode if you haven't already. But I want to focus in on one particular part of last week's episode, and I'll tell you what that is in just a moment. Just for the record, I did have a thought, since I am in Ajaccio and in Corsica, to record a sort of special episode on, say, 14 things we can learn from Napoleon Bonaparte about content marketing. But then I thought, one, that's a bit cringe, and two, I can't think of 14 things. I did think of one thing though. Do you want to hear it? I'll take that as a yes. The one thing that I did hear is, that I did think is, as a content marketer, use your background, use your varied background to your advantage. That lady was having a good look. Just like Napoleon Bonaparte did. He came from Corsica, which basically wasn't part of France until just before he was born. 2 years before he was born, did you know that? And he didn't even speak good French, but he somehow became the emperor of France. Wow. So, as a content marketer, it's one of those roles. You could be a journalist, you could be a marketer, you could be a writer. I've met content marketers who've been engineers. It's one of those roles, you come from so many different backgrounds and literally use it to your advantage to create great content and to do your job in an awesome way. But anyway, that was getting cringe towards the end, wasn't it? That was getting pretty cringe. So let's not do any more of that. I think what we should focus on today in this episode is the whole sense around creating quality content. And I've talked about this before. And when it comes to content marketing, you can't really get away from it. People throwing out that line, hey, when it comes down to it, all we're trying to do is create quality content. I agree. But what does that even mean? And what does it look like? So let's get into that a little bit today, because let's replay you a little bit of that portion of the interview with Tom Winters last week. Listen into this.
But from my perspective, to simplify it a little bit, we should look at the valuability, how valuable is our content and the authority that we have. So these are the two biggest factors, of course.
So that's one quick snippet, but broadly, the whole conversation boiled down to that, right? There's been this Google leak. There's talk about backlinks actually being important when they were saying they weren't important. SEO often is kind of like this hacky type topic where you're like, is the way to make a difference through SEO and to drive more traffic and to get more conversions, to focus on all these kind of hacks behind the scenes and all these little optimizations we can do? And half the answer is probably yes, but the other half of the answer is, hey, just focus on creating quality content that your audience loves, that potential customers love, and you're going to be well on your way to performing really well in search and getting great results. But that leaves the question, what is quality content? Because it's become such a sort of like catchphrase. Just create quality content. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I agree with you. But what does it even mean anymore? It's one of those things you say, and you've said it so many times that it loses all meaning, right? So let's get into that today. And I have just a couple of thoughts on this quick About Last Week episode as I walk along the port area here in Ajaccio. It's beautiful, it's very warm, and I'm not complaining about it. My two quick thoughts on quality content is, first of all, how do you measure whether content is quality? Because we're in the midst of our jobs, we can't just push pause and sort of start from zero again. Like, you know, if you're listening to this and you have been working as a content marketer for some time, obviously you've been creating content, you're creating more and more content all the time. So we're not just going to stop and start from zero. You've got to first understand what content that you've created in the past is quality. And then secondly, how do you do more of that, and how do you double down on that, and how do you create more quality content? So first of all, how do you measure whether a certain piece of content is quality or not? And what I want to posit, what I want to put out there is, it's a whole lot more about qualitative data and qualitative feedback than you might think, and then it has been trendy to believe. And I think so much of the last few years around marketing, probably since, you know, the early 2000s, the internet really taking off, has been about quantitative data. Like, literally, show me the numbers and I will tell you whether you're successful, right? And I think to a certain extent, when we talk about content, that will only ever get you so far, and qualitative feedback is ultra important. And I think more and more marketers are realizing that quantitative numbers don't tell you the whole story. And I want to tell you a little bit about a friend of mine called Matt. I hope I can call you a friend, Matt. We've never actually properly met in person, but I think what you're doing is awesome, so I've just gone ahead and said you're my friend. But Matt is building this company called Rocky.io, and I find it really inspiring and awesome because his vision behind that is literally this, that Google Analytics and other tools like that are showing quantitative data on content marketing only give you half the story. And so he's building this tool which essentially is going to help content marketers, sure, leverage quantitative data, but also qualitative data through a whole bunch of different things that they can integrate with their blogs and with their websites. So think little surveys, post articles, and you see this in a B2C environment quite a bit. What did you think of that article? Or what did you think of this? Literally, it's simple, but asking people what they thought of your content is a way to actually unveil whether that content is quality for them. Because the challenge is, as a content marketer, you're so often not the persona that you're addressing, right? Right now I'm working at a company called Upflow. We're targeting CFOs, we're a fintech. CFOs, financial controllers in B2B companies. And let me tell you, those are some of the most polar opposite type people to me that I can think of in this world. I'm still discovering them, let's be honest. But I'm different to them, and I know how different I am to them. And so the fact that I think something's quality content is reasonably irrelevant, because it doesn't matter as a content marketer what I think it is. And if I think it's great, obviously I do think it's great because I've put a lot of hard work into it. But at the end of the day, it really matters what they think. And that's what's going to move the needle. That's what's going to build trust. That's what's going to drive, all the results you want, more conversions, more pipeline, ultimately more revenue for your company. So I just think this approach that Matt's taking to building Rocky.io is really cool, because it's bringing together quantitative and qualitative data and using that qualitative stuff to actually get a sense from the real people who are consuming the content. What do you think about it? Maybe you don't have a tool like Rocky to do that, but you can actually ask people. It sounds so straightforward. Sometimes we want to get so hacky on it and we want to try to sort of like figure out behind the scenes using all these different tools, like what's the dwell time on the page and all this sort of stuff. And sure, that might be a leading indicator, but why don't you just go to them and ask, is this content actually useful to you? Is it interesting? Is it valuable? Like, did you get the answers you need off it? Or like, how could it be better? Like, maybe you have great relationships with some of your customers. Go to them and ask them those questions. So that's kind of my first thought, is that qualitative data is so underappreciated and so important in creating quality content. Qualitative quality, see? Hey, and there's an enormous cruise ship in the port here at Ajaccio. Amazing. This is a sort of market area. If you are just listening on the podcast apps, hey, why not come on over to the YouTube link and you can see the full video of today's episode. Me waltzing through Ajaccio downtown talking quality content. So that's my first thought, is like, qualitative feedback is so undervalued, so underappreciated, and I think can help you unlock more and more a sense of, is what I'm creating quality, or am I missing the mark? And it's such a crucial first step, because as I said, we're not starting from zero, we're not starting from the start line, we're in the midst of it. We can't stop and go back and just like have a fresh start. So why don't you measure first up what you've already been doing? Secondly, a second point around this is, how do you create more of the expert quality content that your audience is loving? So once you've measured it, I think it's all about working with the people within your company that are the experts. And throughout this podcast, I think we're up to episode 34 now, this has come up so many times, is the role of subject matter experts in your company. And once again, it comes back to the role of a content marketer. You listening in, you're a content marketer, you're in that type of role, maybe you do social media as well. I am a really strong believer in this. Your job is not to be the expert in whatever your company provides or the space that your company is in. I don't need to be a finance to bring a lot of value to Upflow and the role I'm doing in trying to build what we're doing at Upflow. I have skills in packaging the message, in strategizing on how to reach people, all these kinds of things. And to get the very best results, what I'm going to do is rely on people within my company who are like my personas and who have deep expertise in the kinds of topics that my personas want to know about. I don't need to get to a PhD level in freaking balance sheets and all sorts of stuff like that. Like, sure, I'm going to know a decent amount about that stuff, but I'm not even going to try to become an ultra expert. I'm going to focus on what I do best and let them focus on what they do best and use their expertise in my content more and more. And if I can figure out a process and a system and a way of getting their expertise into my content more and more, we're going to be able to do fantastic things. So I'd say once you've got more and more of that qualitative feedback from people to understand, okay, these kinds of things are what makes the content interesting, this type of format or these insights, that's when you feed it back to an SME, a subject matter expert, and you have this cycle with that qualitative feedback of working to be like, how do we pull more of that out of you? How can I as a content marketer pull more of that out of you and package it in a way that once again delivers quality to the audience? So I hope that makes sense. It's about like getting more of that qualitative feedback, being close to your subject matter experts and having them help you create it. And then when it comes to how to work with those subject matter experts, we've touched on this a bunch of times in the podcast, but I think one really important piece of this to acknowledge and to understand, and you'll run into it before too long, is the fact that these people have their own jobs. They might be your CFO, they might be in the sales team, or they might be a customer success person. They're not a content person, and then their whole focus is not about marketing the company or creating content to help you out. If they get that, that's fantastic. But you can't expect it from the get-go. So what you need to do is make it as easy as possible for them and create kind of like a process with them on how you can pull that out of them regularly. I think one awesome way, and what I'm going to be doing at Upflow, is starting a podcast, because I freaking love podcasts. You're listening to my podcast, but soon Upflow is going to have its own podcast, and our CEO and another co-host are going to be sitting down with guests and just talking about the stuff they're experts in. And I think having a regular recurring, it doesn't have to be a podcast, but an episodic type sit down video or audio thing is so useful, because what you want to be able to do is get those SMEs to do the heavy lifting for you. Get them essentially to talk and use that as a download for your content, right? If you're always the person starting, trying to write something and getting them to sign it off or getting them to validate it, I really know, based on my experience, that you're going to meet a lot of frustrations, you're going to have a lot of blockers, you're never really going to get the expert voice in there. Sure, they might be able to bring some clarifications to the points you've already made, but if you can start with their expertise, start with them speaking, you're going to be able to build content that's much more expert, because it has their voice primarily and not yours. So I think as a content marketer, sometimes you've got to get yourself out of the way, put these SMEs in the limelight. They're the people that your audience wants to hear from. They're the people that are like your audience and that have the expertise that's really going to interest your audience. That's unless you're a content marketer marketing to content marketers, and then you are the SME, and that's pretty cool too. But anyway, so two real quick points there on what it means to create quality content. More than just a throwaway line, it takes gathering qualitative information and being super close to your SMEs, having a process with them to feeding back that qualitative feedback and using it to refine the future content you create. So I hope that's been interesting. This has been Ajaccio. It's freaking warm. I'm sweating. I've just been walking at quite a leisurely pace, sort of over lunchtime here, while my children have a nap. So thank you for joining me here on my holiday. I'm going to take a few weeks off now, and I've got a big announcement coming in the next few weeks. I'm going to hold it off for a second, but come follow me on LinkedIn. You'll see my big announcement in the next few weeks and why I'm taking a break for a few weeks as well. But I'm hoping to be back, around early October. I'll be back on deck, publishing episodes. It might look a little bit different, but I'm just jumping the gun. I don't want to jump the gun. There's some big announcement coming, and you're going to need to know about it. So come follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I am. That's where I hang out. And that's where you'll see this big announcement. Otherwise, hope you have a fantastic end of your summer. Enjoy yourself. Hope there's a bit of sun wherever you are in the world. That's obviously summer only if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, but this is a podcast for European content marketers, so I'm taking that for granted. And we'll see you again in a few weeks' time back on the Content Marketing Commute podcast. Bye-bye.